Good morning, everyone. Back again with another project with our clone tool. But this time we're going to add in a little bit of our mask layers. We worked a little bit with a mask earlier in the year with the outside the box. But this time around, we're going to combine these two tools to create a multi-layer project that combines two images. So you have two requirements for this. You have to, one, bring in one image into another, and you also have to use the clone tool in order to clone an area and expand it or bring it into the other image, whatever you need. So I just want to remark, make sure that when you are getting your photos, you're not just stealing from the main page. That's not how we want to download pictures from Pexels. You need to make sure that you click on the image and then go to the free download button up here. All these pictures are free. We might as well get the full resolution of them. So this way our artwork can look really awesome and not blurry or grainy or super small. So make sure you're hitting free download. When I got done hitting free download, here is my image that I worked with. I have two images. So I found a picture, I typed in Grand Canyon, I looked up all the pictures I could find, and this is one I wanted to work with. I also looked up a picture of a skateboarder. So here's my picture of my skateboarder. You can see that they are two different sizes, and that's okay. Because I'm going to be cutting this skateboarder out and putting it into this main picture here. So it's not going to be as much of a big deal if I just have to stretch this one out just a little bit. I actually wanted to show you a finished version of this product. So this actually is what I did in the end. So you can actually see that I used my mask layer to cut out my skateboarder here. I actually added a levels adjustment in order to darken him up a little bit because he's backlit, so his body should be a little bit darker. You can also see that this pond here, compared to the original image that I've already shown you, I've expanded out that water, and I'm going to show you some ways to do that today. There is actually another picture in here. This is actually the first picture I wanted to start with, and then it just didn't look right, even without the layers adjustment. I noticed it right away, so I downloaded another picture and just brought it in here. But I should have opened it up in its original because you can see my new photo was larger than my other photo. So yeah, it's a learning curve sometimes. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create a mask layer, but we're going to do this a little differently than the last time. So the last time I told you to use the the polygonal lasso tool, and we selected out a whole entire area. And after we got done selecting out the area, we reversed it, deleted it, and we're like, hey, great. But there's actually another way in order to do this project. And I gave a little hint to it by the video that I asked you to take a look at. And that is on the pen and the node tool. So the pen tool is this calligraphy pen that's on the toolbar on the left-hand side. We have two options. We either have the pen tool or the node tool. The pen tool actually draws. The node tool manipulates, basically. So we're going to start off with the pen tool. First thing you want to do is make sure your image is large enough for what you want to do. So I'm going to actually just make this guy just a little bit larger. I'm just going to fit them in. I think that actually will turn out really nice. You can always just manipulate it later. Just remember that once we rasterize something, we really don't want to make it larger or smaller, just because it could mess with the image a little bit. So try to get it into the size that you want before rasterizing. Now, say I want to make him a little bit larger, and I go to rasterize. But I have all this extra information over here that I don't want to be there because then it could reappear later on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Layer, Rasterize, and Trim. The reason why I do Rasterize and Trim is because you can see it cuts off that extra that is not on the canvas. All right, so now, Pen Tool. What I'm going to do is the pen tool is really nice because we can manipulate it up until we change it to a selection. And yes, we can make these lines a selection. Now, one thing I highly suggest is before you start using the pen or the node tool, turn these guys off because these can really wreak havoc in your project if you leave them on. Okay, so what I like to do is I like to start and end points wherever curves begin. And all I'm going to do is I am going to, this time around, focus on the ends of the curves. And what I'm going to do later on is I'm going to come back and I am going to adjust all of these lines so this way it fits my guy perfectly. Because when we were doing the lasso tool, we had to click a ton of times. And because we had to click a ton of times, if we messed up one, it would get really annoying to have to restart and readjust. And not only that, but like our selection wasn't perfect. Now this, in the other hand, because we're going around all these curves, we can actually come in and bend our lines in order to match the subject perfectly. And you can see I can go rather quickly with this because I'm going to go in and I'm going to fix all of these later on. So I don't have to be 100% perfect on it, but going at least 95% there is definitely a good idea for you. So I'm going to actually pause the video until I'm done selecting so you don't have to sit here and watch me. All right, so I have gone in and I have gone all the way around my skateboarder here. Yes, I did not get to my skateboard yet, but that's perfectly fine. I'm going to show you what to do later on. So before I move on, I did forget one thing. I forgot to duplicate my layers. Always get in the habit of, no matter what, duplicating your layers so you always have an extra copy. So I'm going to move these guys down so this way I can actually group them if I want to. And those are my originals, so I know not to mess with those. Now, back to the curve. You can see how the line reappears, and the second I press the pen tool, this reappears. Now what you're going to do is you're going to click and hold down and switch to the node tool. You can actually switch to the node tool by hitting the P button. You can see how it switches back between the pen and the node. Now, what I am going to do is I'm going to hold the command key and start to adjust these lines. All you got to do is just click on them, and you can see that little wavy line that's there. What that's telling you is hey, you're allowed to manipulate this line now. And just try to stretch these out until they line up and match all those little curves that you made, or that are actually on your picture if you have them. So I would go all the way around and do this around the entire project. Again, so you don't have to sit here and be bored and watch me do this over the next couple of minutes, I'm going to pause the video. All right, so we're back. And actually, while I was gone, I actually created the curve for the skateboard as well, and I stretched them out to the way that they needed to be. So because I have two objects, I'm going to create two different sets of curves. Basically, when we use this pen tool, what it is the object is called a curve because of the using the pen tool. That's essentially what it creates. We've actually seen this before, but you probably never paid attention to it. If you actually look in the shape tool and you actually go and create a shape, once you create it, it actually says create to curves. The reason why we like curves is because when we have our node tool, we're able to manipulate this and make curves with these lines if need be. So delete that shape. Now, one thing I suggest, just like we make duplicates of our background, I actually like making duplicates of these curves. And here's the reason. If for some reason I mess up and I just can't get it back the correct way, I have these curves to fall back on. The reason why I say make a copy of them is because once we do the next step, what's going to happen is this curve is actually going to disappear. So what I'd like to do is make a duplicate now, so then this way I can go back to it if need be. Now there's other ways for us to go back to a selection. However, the issue is if we manipulate the skateboarding guy here at all, meaning make them smaller or move them around or whatnot, then that selection that we've made is not going to change. So this, we can always resize. Same thing for this, but a selection we can't. We can also, yes, we can move a selection, but it's a lot easier to move a curve, I find, because we can always throw in a fill if need be. Now, what we're going to do is, actually, before I move on, I want to make one more point. With the node tool, just remember, if you put a spot in a box in the wrong spot, we can actually move this any position that we need to. We just move that individual one. So if you accidentally put something in the wrong spot, or you forget to curve something, we can always manipulate that later. And you can manipulate this in any way that you need to. So, and if you get stuck, by all means, just let me know, and we can work out how to fix your issue. Okay. Now you'll notice that I just clicked on that little box. It came up with these little handlebars. Basically, what that does is it adjusts the line's curve coming into that box and how it comes into it. So just in case you need it to look a little bit differently, that's how you do it. All right, but anyway, let's move to the next step. So the next step is to create our mask. So I made copies of this, so I'm good to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change back to the pen tool, and you're going to see up here it says mask and layer. I like to actually, a mask and selection. I like to go for the selection first, just because I don't know if for some reason if the layers don't match up correctly, or you don't have them in line and you hit mask, then you have to undo it and redo it. It's just easier, I find, to change this to a selection. You can see how now we have a perfect selection of our skateboarder here. Because the skateboarder picture was the next layer down, I'm automatically ready to go, and I can just hit the mask button. But if you weren't, you would have to just re-click whatever layer you want it to be on. Now I'm going to hit mask, and you can see that my skateboarder comes out. Well, my skateboard is not there, so I need it to come there. So what I'm going to do is I am going to hit selection. So again, I have a selection of the skateboard there. We just manipulate the mask layer. I'm going to switch to white because remember, white reveals. And I can just color in my skateboard to come back. I deselect it. And now I have a skateboarder skating over part of the Grand Canyon, at least the rumble of it. Now, as I said before, I noticed he was too bright. So what I did was I came in with a adjustment layer. So what you can do is you can do brightness, contrast, shadows. I think I did levels adjustment. So what I did was I just clicked it and I brought it down just like we did with our name project. I brought it down so it's inside the skateboarder layer. And then I just mess with the black level. I brought that down a little bit. This way it appears as though he's in shadow a little bit more. If you mess with the white, it's just going to make him a little brighter, and you obviously don't want that. If you do with this, it's just going to make them lighter. This actually would, the output white level, you would bring that down a little bit if you wanted them to appear more in shadow. So it's kind of the black level up and the white output down. It's kind of, you got to work in pairs there if need be. I like to just hit the red X for this so I can always go back and adjust it. If we hit merge, it's kind of finite, and that's destructive editing, which we try not doing destructive editing as much as possible. Now, the next part of this assignment, not only to bring something in, just like I did with that, with a mask layer, I also want to clone something. So we've already learned a lot of different tools with this, but we have to start combining the usage of tools. So one thing I like to do is select out an area so I know that I am not going to accidentally paint in an area I don't want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to extend this little puddle that's here. So this way it fills in all of this area here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in with my polygon lasso tool. Yes, you can use your pen tool if you find that that is an easier tool to use. In this case, just for speed wise, I am going to use this. Plus, if I mess this up, I can always just redo it. It's not that big of a deal. I'm going to leave this rock in. I like that rock. Plus, it would actually take more work to get rid of it. Okay. Now, this puddle here is reflecting the sky above it. So what I can do is if I come in with my stamp tool here, because of this reflection, now this works for my project, it may not work with yours. What I can do is I can flip this vertically. The reason why I want to flip this vertically is because I want to copy the information that is up in the sky above this. So if you actually look, there's the tip of the rock right here, and that is there. So as I move down and to the left, that means I have to go up and to the left in order to copy this information here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start maybe somewhere around here. I'm going to put that as my pinpoint. And I am going to come in with a little bit larger of a brush because, okay, notice that my opacity is down around 80. My hardness, in my case, I'm going to actually leave it a little high. I'll explain why in a second. And I'm just going to start copying this in. I want my opacity up just a little bit more. Pardon me. Now, so I filled all this in. It's not perfect because of the selection that I did there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to deselect. I'm going to start blending those in. But I want you to pay attention to the rocks that are there. I didn't do any of that. So notice that you see a little bit of shadow of the rocks through the water. So what I need to do is I need to replicate that along the edge over here. But first, I worked with a little bit harder of a brush. Or I'm sorry, with less of an opacity. But I kept my hardness up. The reason why I want my hardness up is because I do want to still create that sharp line. So I'm going to bring my opacity back up, maybe around like 75 this time. I'm just going to run along these edges over here. So I want that little bit of fade, but I also want the rocks to start showing through. And that is going to copy what I'm seeing here naturally occurring. So then when someone's viewing this, and of course, like there's not going to be any like super sharp edges caused by the water. So I want like more of like rounded. So any like sharp edges that I create, that's where I'm going to personally feel like I should be creating or mimicking that little shadow that's being created by the water, just like above. And I just want to run this along just along that edge to duplicate what I saw above. And that's how you have to analyze your project. So you have to see what's going on in your image that you can replicate and make it look very similar. Now, the only complaint that I have of myself is the fact that this is still a little bright down here. So what I might do is is I may actually darken this a little bit. So what I can do is that here's another tool if you want to mess around with it. This is called the Dodge tool. Dodge, Burn. These are the main two that I use. Dodge, basically what you're doing is you're making it lighter. Burn, you make it a little more vibrant. It's not darker. So just be careful with it. It may make highlights like this just a little bit darker. And again, I'm not messing with this too much. I'm just going to go over it a couple times just to darken that last little bit. Don't mess with Burn too much, because if you mess with it too much, it'll just make a little bit too much contrast for you. This is a tool that you definitely use sparingly. So yeah, I'm done my project. So I've expanded out that water, made it look real. No one would ever know. Now it looks like this skateboarder is hopping over this water, doing his little ollie there, and going over the water instead of the trash can like he originally was doing. If you have any questions about this project, let me know. This one is a little bit harder than what we've done before because it's combining some skills that you've learned in the past. But let me know if you have any questions.